Well, hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for this evening's edition of Perspectives in Professional Psychology. This is a podcast of the College of Professional Psychology at the Chicago School. We're very excited to have an alum of our clinical psychology program in Southern California. At the time, it was our Irvine campus. It's now our Anaheim campus. So welcome, Dr. Lorenzo Aranda.
Thank you for having me today.
So, Dr. Aranda, maybe to start us off, can you just share a little bit about your professional journey and what initially drew you to the field of military psychology?
Well, I suppose ever since high school, I was interested in the field of psychology. Simultaneously, I was interested in the military. Like many young boys, I was playing with G.I. Joes and replicating combat scenes. I had the aircraft carrier that was bigger than me at the time. Later on, as I started to really strategize how I wanted my adulthood to look, I came to realize I wanted to merge both psychology and military into one. Why not? And so I started to shape things in that direction pretty much from high school, taking coursework in the realm of psychology, and then got to my undergrad program, big university, first time away from home. I got kind of lost in the sauce. So I remember being there when all of the psych students, the New Year psych students, were in the big auditorium, and the dean of the program says, "Look to the student to the left of you, now look to the student to the right of you. One of those people will not be a psychology major this time next year." And I found it very shocking and discouraging, and it kind of stuck with me. And um, I ended up being one of those, actually, switched to criminal justice and graduated my undergrad with that. And then it wasn't until later on, when I was in the working world, decided to go into my master's program and pursue mental health counseling. I was in my internship towards licensure, when I was like, well, I just feel like I got off the train too soon. Let's see what this looks like at the final destination, which is the doctorate degree. Little did I find out that isn't the final destination, because you're constantly developing yourself. You go after board certification, and then you're taking special focus programs. It's been a wonderful journey, and I'm exactly where I wanted to be when I kicked the whole thing off. So I feel very fortunate.
Yeah, there really is no such thing as a final destination when you're a clinical psychologist, right?
Right.
It's a process of continuous learning. It's a lifelong process.
And the CEs that we're demanded to take for our
Yeah.
licensure, those are just formalities.
Yeah. So as you've gone along that journey, were there some kind of key formative experiences for you that guided your direction or shaped your choices?
Yeah, everything from the coursework before I got into my current role to some of the experiences shared with me in therapy by my patients. It really has been eye opening. And like being a therapist in any environment, regardless of being in the military, it forces you at times to put your own life in perspective. We all have our journeys, and um, a lot of our development, our personal experiences help shape why we want to be therapists and why we want to help others. And I think that that's part of that journey that we talked about a minute ago too. It's not only the professional development, but that personal refinement, that identity refinement that occurs through borrowing the experiences of others in that trustful therapeutic relationship.
Yeah, I found that to be true myself, and I say this often, but just the process that we go through, that journey we take to become clinical psychologists, changes the way we view the world. And there are these little micro moments that kind of shape the direction we move in as clinicians.
Absolutely. And amidst the sociological or the macro level right now, some of the chaos occurring in the world, it's important now more than ever that on the micro level, we're making strategic changes in the individual to allow them to optimally take effect and be
Yeah.
agents of change.
Yeah. That that's a huge part of what we do, right? Is helping people feel empowered to take control of their day-to-day existence and to make the choices that take them down the road they want to go.
Or at least recognize the areas where they have to surrender a little bit of control for their
Yeah.
own.
Yeah. It's I talk about these concentric circles, right? There's the sphere of control that we operate in. Then there's a sphere of influence that we operate in that's outside of that. And then there's that big, big circle outside of that over which we have no control.
Yeah, no man's land.
That's right. Yeah. There's the field of clinical psychology, which is really broad in and of itself. There's so many different directions you can take. And then there's the subfield of military psychology. And I guess if you think about them as a Venn diagram, there's obviously a lot of overlap, but I'm wondering if you can talk to us a little bit about the field of military psychology and the degree of overlap with the field of clinical psychology.
Right. Well, I think it's important to note, first of all, the common misconception is that you have to be in uniform to practice military psychology.
Mm.
And it's not about the practitioner, it's about the population being served. So in this case, it's anybody in military service that denotes whether or not it's military psychology. We have several civilians that we work alongside, even those of us who are practitioners in uniform, and those are contracted providers as well as direct hire government service employees. So it's one big happy family with a common mission.
So what could you maybe break down some of the differences being active duty clinical psychologist serving military populations from a civilian who's contracted to provide those services? What's the difference in the roles?
Well, when it comes to, the bare bones conducting treatment,
Mm.
there is very little difference. The op tempo is pretty much the same. If you're in uniform, you have some additional duties, roles that you play. Like for instance, even though my primary day to day is conducting sessions with patients, I'm also in charge of the substance treatment program run by the Air Force. So in my clinic, I'm in charge of that, and I have a small team of mental health technicians that work along with me on that mission. And so that occupies a little bit more of my time. But it's great too because I also get to experience some of the admin role that some, lone private practitioners might not get exposed to. But it's varied and it's definitely fulfilling. Now, when you do climb the ranks and you're doing this a while, the role shifts a little bit, and we can talk about that a little bit later. But yeah, the other big difference is that the civilian can stay stationary, whereas when you're in uniform, periodically you're moved. So
Yeah.
officers, it's strictly every 4 years. Now, if you have a kid that's graduating high school and you want them to finish out in the same school for their senior year, then you can request an extension to that. So they're generally pretty accepting of family situations and stuff like that. But it is roughly every 4 years, you move to a different location. You're obviously able to provide a list of preferences in order of preference, and they try to match you as best as possible. Ultimately, it's the needs of the organization. They harp on that all the time. But right now, I'm stationed at LA Air Force Base in El Segundo, California, living in beautiful Marina del Rey, California, with
Mhm.
seals squealing in the middle of the night. And I met my number one choice. So the organization knows that there's very attractive options on the civilian side, and they try their best to hang on to you by giving you what you want to the best of their ability.
So when you're enlisted, they do their best to try to take care of you.
Exactly. Including
Uh,
pretty healthy retention bonuses.
well, that's nice too. You may have mentioned this earlier, and I apologize if you did, but can you tell us a little bit about when you enlisted? Were you enlisted when you started the program, or did you enlist after you completed the program?
Yeah, I was. I had kind of a unique journey. I enlisted in 2008 and spent a very brief time um, in what's called a specialist rank while I was in basic training. Then I became a cadet and I went to the officer school full fledged, came out of there, graduated as a lieutenant, and climbed the ranks. My role with the Nevada Army National Guard at the time was military police. And so I was in charge of a platoon of soldiers conducting primarily law and order operations, deployed to Afghanistan in that role with them. And then once I progressed through my master's program and then into my doctorate program, still doing my drills the whole time with that organization. It came time to apply to internship, and knowing that I wanted to be a military psychologist, I applied to every single site,
Mm,
online sites within all 3 branches that offered the internship, and so just landed on the Air Force, and I've
yeah.
been full-time with them ever since, and I feel very blessed.
Do you feel like, I know that internship decisions are kind of made independently, but when you're looking for a VA internship or some sort of military pre-doctoral internship, does a history of enlistment help make a difference?
No, there's different perspectives. The quick answer is it matters nothing whatsoever,
Yeah,
but the reality is it's kind of, I mean, obviously, when you're doing interviews for these internship sites, there's certain biases or preferences of the interviewer, right?
sure.
And so some perspectives are, I want somebody who's fresh from the civilian world because I can mold them into both being an officer and a psychologist within the military sector at the same time. Other perspectives are, I want somebody who's got a solid foundation of being in the military because they know all the culture, they know the acronyms, which can be confusing to the layman. And so there's pros and cons to each, I'd say, in the end of it.
So, I'm really curious, hearing you talk about your experience of being a military psychologist and your enlistment history. Is there a profile of a military psychologist? I'm wondering, is there a certain type of person who's in the field who might tend to thrive in military psychology versus those who take a more traditional approach, so to speak?
I'd say you kind of want to be a Swiss Army knife
Yeah.
practitioner. And I say that because the organization at times will want to see you be able to function autonomously.
Mhm.
Sometimes you're in a very small clinic. You might be the only provider with maybe 2 mental health technicians assisting you, or in a deployed environment. It's very likely that it looks like that
Yeah.
versus a big clinic. Um, and then at times you are in a big clinic, stations, stateside, and you have to work effectively as part of a large team. So being able to adapt in either environment, pretty critical. And
Yeah.
as far as individual skill sets, I'd say efficiency, attention to detail, and especially as a psychologist, when you're doing a testing battery, you want to have that attention to detail regardless.
Absolutely.
So it's kind of a, I'd say, core skill set of a psychologist in general.
Yeah.
But also some of that other general stuff like being a critical thinker, thinking outside the box, uh, the generalist approach that a lot of grad programs in psychology offer. You want to extend that into the military as well because your role is going to shift over time.
Yeah. I was just as you were sharing your perspective on that, I was just thinking, I mean, so much of that is kind of part of being a clinical psychologist, right? The critical thinking, the attention to detail, the discipline that's expected of us as mental health professionals at the doctoral level. It really comes down to a choice of what kind of lifestyle do you want to live? Like, do you want to be subject to moving every 4 years or all the other chain of command kinds of things that go along with being a enlisted military psychologist?
And keep in mind too that every 4 years, it's if you've decided to go career. There's a certain segment of folks, they put on the uniform, they go through the internship program. As part of the structure of the way it is, you are committed to one term or one location as part of your contract. But once that location is done and you're at that crossroads, some people choose not to continue a military path. They say, "Thank you for the training experience of the last few years. I'm gonna move into private practice now and do my thing," or something like
Yeah.
that. So, yeah,
And just
it's fine.
move on when you're ready
Yeah,
to move on, as long as you fulfill the terms of your contract.
exactly, yeah.
Yeah. So I know that we have some current grad students on the podcast with us tonight who are listening, and some students who are interested in joining the doctoral program in clinical psychology. So I'm wondering if you could share with us, for those graduate students or prospective graduate students who are listening, are there some training experiences that they could seek while they're in their program that you think would be especially valuable to them if they're interested in pursuing their career in military psychology?
Yeah, I'd say first, don't box yourself into thinking you have to have a practicum associated with the military or even VA population. Broad-based understanding of treating everything from children all the way through geriatrics is going to have added value. Keep in mind that yes, military members are adults, but they also bring with them to their duty stations their families, including
Right.
their children in a lot of cases. And so we have certain internship sites have rotation specifically in child psychology if any folks end up being interested in that route. But otherwise, you can encounter those variety of populations. The big thing is you want to be sharp in CBT. Now, I know when I went through my program at Chicago School, I was eating psychodynamic like it was my morning cereal. I was loving it. And then I hit a brick wall when I got into internship because all they do is CBT. It's like a lot of managed care systems. It's manualized. It's symptom repair or a regression, and
Yeah.
you don't really get the opportunity to do some of the deep dive into childhood and developmental issues that some of the other orientations offer. Although I did find a nice compromise when I was in the middle of my internship. I said, "Okay, you won't let me do my psychodynamic. I'm going to do Judith Beck's schema therapy because that comes pretty darn close, and it's still in your
Yeah.
CPT category." And so they couldn't bother me after that.
That's so funny. So really, it sounds like to me that generalist training that we all go through in our programs is really what you need to prepare you for
There's
no
no there's made
job.
there's no major adjustment or adaptability demands aside from that. Yeah,
Yeah. The skills, all of those skills are applicable, even if you never went to a specific practicum training site or took specific courses in military psychology. Those things don't hurt necessarily, but they don't necessarily give you a leg up.
exactly. Yeah,
Yeah.
but certainly you want to get as much testing experience as possible because that is our bread and butter, at least for the time being. I know master's levels practitioners in various states are trying to encroach upon that, but then again, we're also trying to get more prescribing privileges. So everybody's
That's
trying to
correct.
get in everybody else's territory. But yeah, in the military environment, we're working alongside a lot of social workers and of course psychiatrists, but they're few and far between. But primarily, we're side by side with social workers, and the big thing that makes us stand out is we're the only ones in the clinic that can do testing batteries for stuff like ADHD, TBI, and personality stuff. So that's what makes us an asset.
Yeah, I talk about that a lot. I think it's one of the biggest and most important differentiators for licensed psychologists is that diagnostic and assessment skill that we bring to our clinical settings.
Yes, absolutely.
So when you think about the patient populations, and I'm kind of thinking ahead and anticipating what your answer is going to be, but are there are there more common presenting concerns that you see among the client populations you work with? Is there a difference between the active duty service members that you work with and their families? Does that differ in any way?
Well, the common stereotype in the civilian world is that most of the cases are PTSD
Right.
because the assumption is that if you're wearing the uniform, you've been exposed to combat or pretty darn close to it at some point in your life. And the truth is, statistically, the majority of service members aren't, especially now that we're heading further and further away from those Afghanistan years post
Yeah.
9/11. There's fewer people who have had that combat related experience. But what does happen is a lot of the things that happen in the civilian sector, victims of sexual violence and other close to death experiences. Also, some folks simply realize that mental health treatment is something that's afforded to them at no cost as a benefit of being in the military.
Yeah.
And they want to tie loose ends on some long-standing, uh, you know, intrapsychic conflict that they've experienced for quite some time that they haven't resolved, and that's fine as well.
As long as you treat that with CBT.
It's a delicate dance.
Yeah. You touched a little bit on kind of, some of the requirements for moving that are part of being an active duty service member. But I'm wondering, does that show up in your client populations? Deployment, transition, identity shifts. Is that a common issue? I think to the point you were trying to make is that humans are humans. whether you're active duty enlisted or a member of the civilian population, anxiety, depression, trauma,
Right.
it's very similar.
Yeah, I mean, it's all the standard problems, but then a few unique ones. A big thing with the base I'm at right now, it's a lot of Space Force, and a lot of the support personnel are Air Force. So
Yeah.
it's called an Air Force base, but it's mostly Space Force folks. To civilians, the biggest thing about my base is we're in charge of GPS. So obviously, you'd be driving in circles or pulling out the old ridiculous fold maps if we didn't do the mission we have here. But there's a lot of high intelligent folks here that do these missions, a lot of
Yeah.
satellite stuff, missile stuff. And so, a lot of computer types. And the curse of the highly intelligent is that sometimes you can't turn off the thinking even when you should. It becomes self destructive. The worried well notion, right? And so we have lot of anxiety, people who perceive that they're not performing up to standard, even when there's no external indicators of such. So it's a lot of bringing them down to reality, some of that unhelpful thinking, reformulating. But there's also some things that, like you mentioned, the identity thing. It's huge when you've served a 20-year career, and now you're told it's time for you to go. Go do your retirement thing. We're not in charge of you anymore. Well, a lot of folks are like, well, what do I do with myself now? I've been, especially if they haven't tended to a personal life outside of the military, one of the things when I entered this field, I was shocked to find out how many people are in that category, right? I look at it as like legs of a table, right? You have all your important things resting on the surface of the table, and the legs are your roles or identities. And a lot of people in the military function balancing everything on just one leg. I am a service member. I am a service member, and they don't have any kids. They don't have family. They aren't part of a church community. They aren't volunteers anywhere. And so when they come to the end of their service, that leg just gets yanked right from under the table and everything falls over. Versus somebody who's played other roles, developed their life in some way, this additional roles, they have other legs to sustain them after that military one is yanked out. And so for some people, it's just helping them rediscover who they are or what that looks like in the absence of the uniform for the next chapter of their lives.
Yeah, I can see that being a really important aspect of working with the population that you do. And not to equate what I'm about to share with the experience of active duty service members, but I remember when I graduated, when I got done with my program, I had poured all of my identity for so long into being a student. And I graduated, and I'm like, "Oh, I don't know. I'm supposed to be a professional now, but I don't know what that means because everything is my whole identity has been wrapped up in being a student." And I was super comfortable with that. I was pretty good at it. And so there was this like huge like transition for me to make from being a student to now I'm a psychologist. I'm really out there as a professional and I can see, but I guess the good thing for me is that I had that other identity ready set for me. I just needed to adapt to it. But I can see if you're if you're balancing your world on one leg, if the whole tabletop is balanced on one leg and that gets removed unexpectedly, that can be traumatizing and really disorienting in and of itself.
Right. And then, of course, some of them, they have those deployment experiences that they've ignored for several years. Maybe they were deployed in a combat environment and had a near death experience 10 years ago, 12 years ago, and they've just been engaged in unhealthy forms of coping like alcohol use since then, bouts of anger with the spouse, stuff like that. And now they're at the end of their term. They're like, I'm stepping away from the mission that I've served all these years. It's time to pay attention to all this stuff finally. And so they come into the clinic and they unload it
Yeah.
like 2 to 4 months before it's time for them to leave. And it's like,
Yeah.
especially when it comes to, time to obtain VA benefit, disability benefit, because if they're coming to me with all of this stuff, my goal is to help them resolve it by the time they leave. Well, if they're received by the VA and the VA is trying to establish what is your impact or to your functioning based on your mental health needs, well, we addressed it all before they got there. And so their disability benefit is now maybe just a little bit less. So it's a delicate dance.
Well, that's so interesting. Yeah, I can see that. There's a lot of skill building that's involved in that transition. And are there? Do you feel like part of that is that there are these really well established support structures when you're an active duty military member that maybe kind of fill the gaps for some of the skills that you need and maybe don't have as you transition into a civilian life, or is something different going?
Oh, no, I'd say you hit the nail on the head because you gotta keep in mind a lot of these folks come in at age 18, 19,
Yeah.
and they don't know anything about the adult world other than the military environment, which has fed them, clothed them, told them where to be and when to be there. They've had guardrails in their day-to-day existence through much of their life.
Yeah.
And so the idea of just being poured out, off the cliff into the civilian sector where they're in charge of what they do when they wake up in the morning, it can be very overwhelming.
It feels like a wild and much less organized world for them.
Right. Yeah. And you just have to steer them in direction of seeing the opportunity in that. Yes, there's so many paths you can now take, but the thing is, you help them choose the one that's going to bring them the most fulfillment.
Yeah, given that, I'm wondering, are there kind of any ethical challenges or professional challenges related to that you think are unique to military psychology?
But yeah. So the average civilian practitioner, the person in front of you, the patient, the client, they are who you're there for. They're
Yeah.
your boss, essentially. When you're a military member in the practitioner role, you have two bosses. You're still in service of the patient in front of you, but you're also in service of the organization that both of you work for.
Yeah. Who's the
So,
client?
yes, there's a lot of delicate ethical dances, and you just have to evaluate each situation critically, but also consult with somebody more seasoned wherever possible, not operating in a silo where mistakes might be made. But yeah, that does, I mean, there's entire CE trainings dedicated to this very thing for a reason,
Yeah.
because, it is sometimes very challenging to negotiate because, obviously there's the mandated reporter that every, provider, is adhering to. But in our case, you say not only threats to yourself or others,
Yeah.
um, but there's also this new one in the military, which is threats to the mission. So we have to go tell other people what you just said if what
Yeah.
you just said is a threat to the mission. And so there's a lot of gray area in that, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's part of the ethical dilemma.
Yeah. That's as you were talking, I was thinking about that and wondering how the privacy and confidentiality boundaries might differ as a military psychologist versus a civilian psychologist.
And aside from that, just the matter of rank. And so when we talk about cultural humility, there's a culture in the ranking in the civilian world. People might look at rankings by socioeconomic status. In the military, it's oftentimes the first line of thought is the rank because even rank is tied to socioeconomic status, right? Especially when it
Yeah.
comes to just officer versus enlisted. I'm a major, and I could be sitting in front of a patient that is maybe a, a sergeant or lower, and they might hesitate to disclose certain things because they're addressing an officer. They're not
Yeah.
seeing just a psychologist, but they're seeing the rank behind it. Or sometimes I have a patient that is maybe a colonel who's above me, and they have this perception of, I'm a superior officer. I need to maintain this professional demeanor or impression, and I don't want to share something that's going to corrupt that in the room. So it's a unique thing.
Yeah, that's really fascinating and something I hadn't considered because as clinical psychologists, we're required to have an appreciation for and a level of competence when it comes to addressing issues of diversity. And there's this whole spectrum that is captured by the concept of diversity. There's race, ethnic origin, religion, gender, sexual identity, all of these things. And as a military psychologist, there's the culture of the military and the rank within that. So that's fascinating because it's a whole nother layer added to the dimension of needing to develop confidence within the space as a military psychologist.
Absolutely. And I think that's partly why we get paid so well is because you
Yeah,
have to think on these different levels, sometimes simultaneously. It's kinda
yeah.
like in Star Trek, the original Star Trek, they had this it was like a chess set, but it had 3 levels where you play
Ah,
chess at once. And it's kind of like sometimes when you're doing conceptualization of a patient and you're right in front of them in the intake, you're kind of operating in that way sometimes.
yeah, you're always playing three-dimensional chess. Yeah, by the way, just as an aside, sounds like you're a Star Trek fan. I'm a huge Star Trek fan.
Oh, yeah.
That's my universe that I spend the most time. If I'm watching something on Netflix or one of the streaming services, I've been through them all multiple times.
Oh, well, look, loosen your critical tone when you watch the newest, Starfleet Academy because it's not doing too well.
I'm right there with you. I watched the first few episodes. I'm like, I'm gonna give it a chance, but I'm not sure I can do this.
Sci-fi version of Saved by the Bell is how I would sum it up.
Knowing that you kind of had an interest early in your development in the military lifestyle and becoming a psychologist, could you talk to us a little bit about how working as a military psychologist has shaped your identity?
Well, I'm learning just as much. I kinda said this at the beginning, but I'm learning just as much about myself in working with my patients as
Yeah,
hopefully they're gaining from my interaction with them. There's a reason why, I'm not one of those folks who after my first contract decided to leave and go do something else. My intention is still to be a military psychologist until I'm told I have to leave. Till I get a memo from the Pentagon one day saying you're crusty, go do something else with yourself. And there's a reason for that. It's because I did a lot of research into what I wanted to do ahead of time. I was doing my interview day one with Chicago School. I brought up how my intent is to go through the program so I could be a military psychologist. Whereas other folks, they didn't even know what the orientation might be or
yeah,
what kind of population they wanted to work with, kind of like when you go into undergrad and you're undeclared major, right?
yep,
And there's nothing wrong with that because I think that's a better route than automatically coming to conclusions about what route you want to go and then finding out later when you have more details, wait a minute, this isn't for me, right? You skip having to do that U-turn.
yeah,
So but I would say just exposure to a variety of populations, including inpatient treatment, the extremes of psychosis, and then, like I said before, the testing. And then if you're exposed to all that, then you kind of just trust your intuition about where your identity, where your personality fits best.
yeah. I had that experience as well. That not knowing where I wanted to go, and I remember I was part of a very small cohort in my program. And the first day of orientation, we were sitting in a little conference room, and our program director had us go around the table and talk a little bit about ourselves and what we wanted to do. And I was one of the last people to go, and I got more and more nervous after every person went because they all seemed to just kind of know what they wanted to do and why they were there and where they were going to go with it. And I felt like the only person in the room that was just happy to be there. I'm just glad to have a seat at this table. I really don't know. And I remember thinking there's something wrong with me because I don't know where I wanted to go. But I found my path. And I think we all do. And that just had that massive imposter syndrome going into the program. And the truth is that, to the point that you made, that a lot of people are going to think they know where they want to go, but if being open to the experience, you will find your way. And yeah, some people have that path really well laid out in their mind, and they've got a plan and they stick to it and they end up right where they wanted to be to begin with. But it doesn't happen that way for most people.
No, absolutely not. You get curveballs, pleasant ones,
Yeah.
unpleasant ones, but
Yeah.
especially early on when you enter the program, letting curiosity be the compass that guides you, I think is critical.
Yeah. I figured out pretty quickly that working with kids was going to be my thing. I'm a pediatric psychologist. I love that space. I feel really comfortable and confident in that space. But I would have never in a million years guess that I would have been dean of a college at a university. And I love it. It's the most fulfilling thing I've ever done, and I'm super happy. It gives me opportunities to speak to amazing psychologists and alums like you. So, yeah, I think that's the message. Be open to the experience. And I hear that from the department chairs all the time when they tell students, just this is a generalist program. You'll have plenty of time and plenty of space to find your path. If you know where you want to go, great, but remain open to the process.
And even by the time you get to the interviews for internship, a lot of those interviewers, they might be turned off if you say you already have a theoretic orientation that you operate out of,
Yeah.
because they want to continue to shape that. They want to continue to help you along the path of developing your professional identity. They don't want you to come in kind of boxed into a certain
Yeah.
shape, right? So yeah, keeping that curiosity and that flexibility, I think, is important.
Yeah. It can almost be a red flag, right? If you come in presenting as fully formed and ready to go, because that's not the way this works.
Yeah, and if I'm an interviewer and I encounter somebody like that, I might think, well, they're still under my supervision. I'm going to offer recommendation or for refinement in how they
Yeah.
approach things, how they
Yeah.
conduct treatment. And this person, because they have so much resolve, they might be resistant to that suggestion.
Yeah. Yeah. When you think about military psychology, Dr. Aranda, and maybe kind of project us out into the future, what do you see for the future of military psychology? Are there any developments or trends that are really promising for you at this point?
Well, the real buzz, regardless of what sector you're talking about, is AI.
Yeah.
And as of this month, fresh off the presses, it's already made its way into our practice. They're finally allowing us to use an AI tool to conduct the documentation of encounters, which for those of people who may be listening who have already started using a desktop program or an app to do that, so they could focus on being in the room with the patient in front of them. It's a game changer, and so we're starting to implement that organization wide. It's doing real well.
Yeah, I think AI is an incredibly powerful tool. And one of the things that I think is so important when you're doing therapy is real being present. Right. I
Absolutely.
mean, that's the key. That's to me one of the gifts of therapy is that you get to be with someone who's fully present with you there in the moment. And if you're trying to take notes during that process, it's pulling you out of the present moment. So there's real power in having a tool like AI that's kind of listening and helping organize the notes for you afterwards. So you're not having to think about that. You're just focused on being really, truly, fully present in the moment with your patient. But I'm curious about your take on this because one of the challenges of AI is really what it's let me think about how to word this, is how it interfaces with clinical training. So
Mm.
I'm curious on your perspective because it's, I feel like it's still important for our clinicians in training to know how to write a good session note,
Right. Yeah.
right? To actually write from scratch a psychological assessment, how to write that report. And AI is kind of taking over that space. And in the clinical realm, when you're already licensed and you've already developed those skills, and then you can look back at the session note or the evaluation report that's generated from the assessment you did, you can look at it and know what's right, know what's wrong, know what makes sense, know what needs to be changed. But there's this part of clinical training that I get a little worried about when it comes to the evolution of AI and how it's being inserted into the clinical space. I'm curious if you have any thoughts on that.
Well, absolutely. I think foundationally, I think it's important to denote here with the use of AI, follow-up sessions and intake sessions. I don't have that much hesitation in allowing AI to do my documentation for follow-ups because we're pretty much in maintenance mode. But
Right.
I would never want an AI application to do an intake note for me, especially when it comes to the conceptualization piece, because that is truly an art form that
Yeah.
I feel, reflecting on my development, took years to develop. And I wouldn't want to lose that skill set by not riding that bicycle for too long.
Right. Yeah, and that's the threat, right? Because AI, it can do so many things so well that if we're not careful, it could supplant our own critical thinking skills. And I think that your comment on the conceptualization piece is so important because there's the science of what we do that helps us kind of arrange the threads, but how those threads all fit together to create the diagnostic or the clinical picture of the patient or the client in front of us, that conceptualization piece, that's the art. That's weaving together the tapestry to help us
Absolutely.
understand what's going on with the patient.
And yeah, you talk about the synthesis of all those data points into summarizing the individual in front of you. But there's very technical aspects to it too. Like right now, a lot of these AI applications, they don't have remote cloud storage. And
Mhm.
so when you're using AI, you have it turned on, it's recording the voices, it can create a script, it can create a summary, it can create the information in a format conducive to your note taking, but it doesn't remember session to session like the human being does because that data is dumped as soon as it's processed it. In a lot of cases, there are
Yeah.
more advanced cloud service programs that retain that data over time, but most of them do not. And so the AI is starting from scratch each time you turn it on.
Yeah.
So that's why we'll always be an asset.
Yeah, I agree. Because we were talking about the one of the gifts of therapy is having another human being in the moment being fully present with you. That's such a rare thing. And
Well, it's interesting you bring that up because there's a difference between what us as practitioners know is good for the patient and what they think is good for them, right? So
yeah,
a lot of these articles justifying the use of AI or even just applications like that do text based or audio based virtual treatment. A lot of their justification, they use data of what patients themselves prefer, right?
right.
Well, we know we have a growing population, especially some of the younger generation, that have predispositions towards social discomfort. And
Mhm.
so, yeah, they're not going to want to be in front of a person and face the ultimate awkwardness of sharing their deepest and darkest secrets. It's much easier to hide behind the screen to do that,
Yeah.
right? And so sometimes you have to force them in that space of discomfort. In other
Yeah.
words, the actual therapy room in person so that they can break through some of those challenges rather
Yeah.
than enabling them by continuing in this format that allows them to say in that safe, cozy space that is not
Right.
allowing them to achieve that personal growth.
Yeah, and some of the AI chat, I don't know what to call it. I hesitate to call it therapy, but I know some of the data coming out is saying that a lot of the use of the the large language models like ChatGPT or Gemini or Claude, a lot of the use is kind of personal conversation and therapy. They're asking questions about what should I do? I'm feeling anxious. And you're not getting that
Yeah.
human connection. You're not getting that discomfort, right? You're not having someone sit with the discomfort, with the dissonance with you. And those models are primarily designed, it's kind of a strong word, but they're sycophantic, right? They're just there to try to make you feel better about where you are at any given moment, even if it's not an adaptive space that you're working in.
Yeah, it's just a more ultra modern, technologically advanced version of that magic 8 ball that you turn over, or or a Freud doll where you pull the string on the back, right?
Yeah.
And I was listening to a podcast the other day, and I don't know if this claim is true. If it is, it's very alarming. But they says that 1 out of 6 adults have had an intimate relationship or at least lengthy conversation with AI. And the problem with that, with whether it's an AI friend or AI partner or an AI therapist, is it's going to be very accommodating. One of our techniques is to strategically challenge our patients at times
Yeah.
and put them in a place of discomfort while in the safe space of the therapy room. AI is not going to do that.
Right.
AI doesn't know how to take that risk
Yeah.
or where to place it. And so it's going to be very, oh yes, that must be very hard for you, right? And
Yeah.
just kind of the head nods virtually. And
Yeah.
not only that, but we know that the therapeutic relationship, it's sort of one of its advantages is it models how they can now step forth into other avenues and have that dynamic where they're able to engage effectively, right?
Yeah.
And build those relationships elsewhere. Well, you can't do that with AI because there's no space to negotiate. It's going to accommodate you
Yeah.
regardless of what you do. Whereas if you're getting an intimate relationship with a real person, you have to constantly compromise and
Yeah.
negotiate that space.
And that's what the research shows us, right? That it's the therapeutic relationship that is the biggest driver of positive change in therapy, regardless of theoretical orientation or treatment modality. It's the relationship.
And that's why Rogers was such a genius.
Yeah, gotta love, gotta love Rogers. He had it. He nailed it
Yeah,
right on the head, didn't he?
yeah.
Well, Dr. Aranda, it's been fantastic to have you this evening. If you're okay with it, maybe we could open it up for a few minutes for questions from watching. All right, everyone, it is your time. Do you have any questions for Dr. Aranda? Let me check the chat here. We'll give it a minute. Does anyone have any questions?
Yes,
Is
sir.
that okay if
Try again.
Oh yeah. You cannot because the host has disabled. Okay. Okay. Yes, Alric de Montenac here. I just wanted to check in with you quickly to see, as a mental health counselor, also an officer. I'm a captain. What would be the steps that I would need to take to get into the program as a military psychologist?
So you're talking about getting into the graduate program to be a psychologist.
Correct.
Right.
And
So
I'm sorry to interject there, but I'm presuming that it is offered at the Chicago School of Psychology.
well, not particular coursework in military psychology. As far as I know, I think Adler is one school that has a track for military psychology. But kind of like how I was saying earlier, you don't need a military psychology specific track. As a matter of fact, you may be more advantageous not to have one because then you're cornering yourself into just that population. And if you end up putting the uniform on after internship and now you're trapped because that's the only population you've primed yourself for, and you realize the military environment's not for you at some point, then you're going to have more challenges to face. You want to keep that generalist approach. I would say do just a general clinical psych program. And then after your first year, look into the health professional scholarship program with the local military recruiter, specifically medical recruiter, and they'll be able to put together a package for you. And just keep in mind that you may not want to stay in the same branch. If you want to broaden your perspectives and have the best shot at being a military psychologist, then you don't want to attach a specific branch to it, especially, your current one. Be open to all the experiences.
Okay. Adler, you say Adler, would that be Adler University or Adler College or?
University.
Oh,
I think it's called university. Yeah. They're out of
Yeah,
Chicago.
I was just wondering that myself.
okay. So I think I have a question for Dr. Garrison. I wanted to, based on my location right now, I just wonder if the program, the PsyD program you offer, if it allows for hybrid situation learning.
Yes, that's a great question. So we have 5 APA accredited programs across the country: Anaheim, Los Angeles, Chicago, Dallas, and Washington, D.C. Our programs are just because of the nature of the training, are full-time face-to-face programs. There's not really a remote or a hybrid version of that. So you would have to apply and enroll in the program if you were accepted, and then be present at the location for one of those programs to pursue your doctoral degree in clinical psychology.
So am I hearing you say that it doesn't matter your domicile, you can if you can travel to if say for instance I'm maybe an hour, 2 hours from Dallas right now. And if I can travel there to take the classes, would that be fine?
I think that would be fine. It'd be a heck of a commute because your classes are going to be, Monday through Thursday. And when you get to the phase of the program that requires practicum or the clinical training components of it, there's a high possibility that you'll be taking classes Monday through Thursday and also have to be at a practicum site at various points that week, including Fridays.
Okay. Yeah, I'm keeping that in mind. But one of
Yeah.
my intention is to transition to the Dallas area. So
All right.
I just didn't know if if I could start the application process, and then as I
Absolutely.
work through that, then to get to that place, then I can fully transition.
Absolutely.
Okay. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate that, and I do appreciate the feedback, Dr. Lorenzo. My intention actually is to become a psychologist serving the military population. Right now, I'm a clinical mental health outpatient therapist. So it is something
Excellent.
that I have significant passion about that I want to pursue.
I
Fantastic.
appreciate that.
We'll keep an eye out for your application.
Well, I started it. I just hasn't gone because I never had the answers to these questions. So I had it on hold actually.
Good luck on your journey.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Joining us.
Wanted to chime in quick if that's okay and ask a question. So I understand it sounds like, and this is me, just for the record, but I understand that you are saying that we should pursue generalist opportunities, especially if we're interested in pursuing an internship. What about those of us who are interested in other subspecialties, as well as military psychology, such as neuropsychology, for example, myself, or forensic psychology, and do know that we will potentially seek board certification, but we'd also like to go this path because we are probably also interested in obtaining like competitive fellowships. Do you have any insight or anything you want to add for that?
So I'm glad you mentioned that because neuropsych is a field that is in high demand in the military right now. We're short neuropsychologists, not only in the Air Force, but across all three branches. And so much so that in Lackland, it's a big site for the advanced program. So you have the option to get into operational psych, aviation psych, neuropsych, child psych, or health psych fellowships once you get your first duty station under your belt, because they want you to have some regular clinic experience. And then you could go to the fellowship, apply to fellowship. And neuropsych is a big one. And it's in Lackland where they actually had to combine Air Forces and Armies into one and work together for their training program just because they didn't have enough neuropsychs to be on faculty for both at the same time. So yeah, if you want to get in that field, the military will be glad to receive.
Yeah,
Thank you
that's
for
a
that.
great question. That's a great question, Alex. And so just to clarify, Dr. Aranda, for students who want to pursue board certification in a specialty area, there would be opportunities at the internship level and postdoctoral fellowship level that would help them qualify for particular board certifications.
Well, yeah. So a lot of those categories for the board certifications are covered in different areas of the military. You can shape your career in the direction to fill the hour requirements, the videotape sessions, the
Mhm.
reports or whatnot, depending on which one you do. Not only that, they'll pay for the cost of obtaining the board certification. Also, they'll give you a team of seasoned psychologists in the field that are willing to essentially walk alongside you on that journey to make sure that you're successful on the back end. You can even enhance that networking benefit by joining the Division 19 of the APA, which is Society for Military Psychology. That's how I developed a lot of my relationships before I even, went to internship. So yeah, there's a wealth of opportunity.
That's hard to beat. So we had one question in the chat from Holly. It says, Dr. Aranda, first off, thank you for taking the time out of your day to meet with us. Is the contract that you discussed part of the HPSP program, or is that separate?
When you do HPSP, which is a fantastic program, I missed the deadline to be able to apply for it, but you essentially have not only all of your classes paid for, so you're not taking out any student loans. They give you a stipend for books and miscellaneous expenses. You essentially don't even have to work while you're on HPSP if you're getting that money every month. But it does have a year. I think it's 2 years for every year that they're paying for. Um, the contract commitment looks a little bit different than if you're just going the internship route. Just because they are giving you so much more money on the front end, they want to recoup some of that on the back end.
Yeah. If you don't do the HPSP, if you miss out on that opportunity, are there other tuition or student loan reimbursement benefits that come from being an active duty military psychologist?
Well, for those like myself, having been in the Guard through the program, I was receiving federal tuition assistance from the Guard, but I was also, because I deployed, I was eligible for GI Bill benefits as well. And so it definitely became an asset when it compared to other people in my cohort who, because whatever obligations financially they had, whether having a small child to take care of or whatever situation they had a part-time work, I was able to focus strictly on my studies.
Wonderful. Well, Dr. Aranda, we got one more hand raised.
Just
Sure.
a, just a clarification, doctor. The HPSP program, could you say at what point for a POC that we can make, contact with as it relates to say, okay, this is my intention, what's the process, and to get like a walkthrough?
Yeah, you just want to go on Google and just type in whatever branch, Army, Navy, or Air Force, and then a medical recruiting. And then that should show you the office closest to your current location. And walk in, exchange contact information, begin developing a relationship with them, and make sure they know who you are. And they're going to begin working with you on your package for the application once it comes time.
Alexandria, I think I saw
Roger
you.
that.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, please. All right.
No, I was just saying, Roger that. I appreciate that. I appreciate that.
All right.
Yeah.
Hi, thank you.
Go
Is it
ahead.
me? All right, thanks for the presentation. I think I had a little confusion, like just with internships. If we do get matched with an internship site associated with the military, is that us like actively enrolling, or is it just like every other internship year, it's just one, and then if you find that you really enjoy it, then you can take that next step to actively enroll?
Yeah. So, question: the internship is not kind of a trial basis. How does the uniform and the lifestyle fit? And then I'll decide after the internship's done. Your military service begins the first day of internship. You're commissioned as an officer, and you're also enrolled into the internship, or as we call it in the military, the residency program.
Thank you so much.
Forgive me if I mispronounce your name. Onishope?
Hi, Anishope. First of all, thank you so much. You answered a lot of my questions, but I also had one question. I'm a master's student in forensic psychology, and I was thinking of also going into one of the forces, either the military or the Air Force. And also, I was going to ask about, because when I look at the HPSP, it's mainly for one of the requirements is being a citizen. Is there any other ones for like non-citizens?
No, that's one of the foundational requirements, aside from the usual fitness requirements of being a military member. Um, and some of that has to do with security clearance requirements. But if you are doing forensic site and you are going to be able to obtain your citizenship, the military offers a great forensic psych fellowship. You actually do your training in Quantico, Virginia, alongside FBI and other federal agencies. So it's amazing.
Thank you so much.
Is it Zhu Chen?
Yes, yes, yes. Hello.
Hi.
Hello. So I realized this meeting might be too early for me, but I'm actually still a college student right now. But I'm like, I've been really interested in like military psychology for a long time since like high school. And I was wondering like at this point in my career, how do you think I can like broaden my resume, especially because I am not an active duty and I'm actually not even American. I grew up in Taiwan and I moved here 4 years ago. I am gonna serve back home in Taiwan, probably this year or next year because it's our like requirement for being a male. So yeah, I was just wondering, what other like extracurricular you would recommend like me as a college student to like connect with veterans and also like just simply building my resume. I do volunteer with Team Rubicon right now. I've been with them for a year.
Familiar with them. That's great.
Yeah, because I read Jake Wood's book and I just found Mr. Wood to be really really cool, and that's like the only resource I have connecting
Yeah.
with veterans. So I was wondering like, what are some suggestions you have?
Well, one of the things that I did while I was in my master's program is I volunteered at the local VA, and I didn't have any licensure under my belt at that point. I didn't do anything having to do with psychology. I was working the front desk, directing people where to go for certain sections, refilling the coffee and donut station. But the fact that I had that on my resume, that I volunteered with the VA, it definitely made a difference in the future when people were considering me.
Okay,
Other
no
than
problem.
that, if your college offers any kind of psychology club like Psychi, you want to join that as well.
Oh, okay, no problem. So just anything. It doesn't really have to do with like veterans right now, but just like anything
No,
that's college.
remember, you want to let your express that you want to be a psychologist, number one, and working with the military population, number two. You should have a reflection of both equally on that resume.
Okay, no problem. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you. Okay, Dr. Aranda, if it's okay with you, one more question.
absolutely.
All right, Olga.
Yes. Good afternoon, sir. My name is Olga. I'm the Navy reservist with the medical training. So I have a question. Is from your experience, the program the prepared student will be the working with the PTSD and the trauma within the military or the winter setting?
What was the last part? I'm sorry.
I'm asking what the program the focus on the PTSD like the Chicago University PsyD.
Yeah. So you're part of getting that general practitioner training, you're not really going to be focusing in your grad program on specific diagnoses. You're not going to specialize in a specific diagnosis like PTSD. You're going to get exposure to the general techniques and applications of treatment that are going to cover all variety of conditions in the DSM, including PTSD. Now, as you develop further and you've got those foundational skills under your belt, like for instance, once I got into the military internship, they gave us a 2-week course on EMDR. So that's one of the go-tos. It's evidence-based treatment is the focus here, right? And so EMDR is one avenue of approach that, whether you're in the military or not, your internship site as
Yes.
far as developing your professional identity, they might incorporate that into your onboarding.
Okay, sounds great. And I'm also curious about so we have a new neuropsychologist track. From your perspective, is there significant demand for the neuropsychologist within the military? It's high.
Certainly, because
It's high need.
you got to keep in mind that when you deploy and you're exposed to an explosion, grenade, mortar attack, something like that, there's a concern of potential for brain damage. And so a lot of those folks have to get a formal evaluation to see if there's any long-term impacts on your psychological function, neuropsychological functioning. And so, yeah, there is quite a bit of demand. But there's also, believe it or not, some gray-haired folks that are still wearing the uniform, and they experience, normal cognitive decline, and that needs to get evaluated for the possibility that they need to be medically separated for it.
Okay.
Those are just some examples.
For the neuropsychologist and so the general, which part is for the military, the high need many people, which part?
I'm not understanding the question.
Sorry. Sorry. I'm asking for the PTSD the doctor or the neuropsychologist, which part is the military or the high need many people?
I think what I'm hearing, Dr. Aranda, is a question around PTSD, neuropsychology.
Yeah.
Is there one area within military psychology that's the highest demand right now?
Yeah.
Ah,
Damn it. Yeah.
I see. Well, like I said, there is a shortage of neuropsychs, but then again, there's a shortage of psychologists in general. None of the three branches have met their quota per se. So I would say really come in or aim to come in just as a clinical psychologist, and then get your toes wet into the culture and environments you're in. And then, like I said, embrace those fellowship opportunities when the time comes, if you choose to do so.
Oh, okay. Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
Plenty of
Thank you so much,
opportunity
yeah.
for postdoctoral specialization.
Right.
Thank you. Yeah.
Well, Dr. Aranda, thank you so much. I just want to say,
If I can interrupt, I do notice there's a few
please.
more hands up. I feel free to share my email.
Will
So
do.
that I mean, for my former program, I always volunteer to be sort of the liaison for the military recruiting, and I answer a lot of questions from current and prospective students. So I'd be glad to extend myself to anybody that's listening in or attending.
Very much appreciate that. I want to say how proud I am that you're a Chicago School alum. Thank you so much for being with us tonight. Thank you so much for your service. And thank you to everyone for joining us on this episode of Perspectives in Professional Psychology. We'll do this again next month, and we'll see you there.
Thank you for having me.